Then when it gets into managing that team, we go into first a training on how to understand this generation that's coming up. So every generation thinks the generation that's coming up is lazy. They do. And we put a quote from Aristotle that says the generation that's coming up, the bearded youth, are lazy. So the way I came up, a job was a job. I came in and I did it. If I got a high five once every 5 years, great. Never expected it. My high five was my paycheck. Now, I'm not saying you lower your standards. I'm not saying you lower any of that. But how you train to those standards is different than it was 20 years ago.
Number it is. So I feel like I need to kind of get rid of the intro where it's like, this is episode number, whatever it may be. All right, everyone. Although I said I wasn't going to do it, we are on episode 30 of the Conquer the Mind podcast. We have a recurring guest for the first time with Rob Flanagan. If you haven't already, I would honestly stop this episode. Go to episode 17 of the Conquer the Mind podcast. As of right now, it's the most viewed podcast on the Conquer the Mind podcast. So I'm excited for this one, Rob. I think we got somewhere between 600, 700 views on YouTube on the last one. We can hit 1,000 views on this YouTube video, I'm not sure what exactly I'll do, but I will definitely incorporate something, whether someone's interested in Houndstown or whatever it may be. There will be some sort of incentive if we get this video to 1,000 views. So Rob, thank you.
Challenge accepted. I got my coffee. I will. I'll do me. I don't know what I'll do, but that's what I'll do.
I'm super excited. This was, I think, just going back to the previous episode, number 17. We talked about some really great points, in my opinion, and just kind of briefly going into Rob's background, if you haven't already. First employee of Dog Popcorn, which later acquired by Dippin' Dotson. Rob has such a funny story, so definitely go into episode 17 if you haven't, where Rob is a great example of really falling into franchising. And if it weren't for the ABCs maybe being a certain way, who knows if Rob would
I know the alphabet.
Franchising.
The only reason. Sesame Street. That's why I'm here.
And if you don't understand that joke, like I said, go to episode 17 and it'll all make sense. But if you don't know, on the previous episode, Rob was actually the cultural co-founder as well as the COO of Houndstown. And one of the things Rob and I were discussing is that titles aren't really the biggest thing at Houndstown specifically, or really even in franchising in general compared to some of the other industries, but titles are still there. Really today's episode, I know, Rob, I think you were at the IFA, but one of the biggest trends we're seeing in franchising is really just responsible franchising. As someone that has been in the industry, really started from the bottom up, I think you'd be a really great example, especially as someone that works with emerging brands and helps them become thriving, successful franchises. I cannot emphasize the difference between a successful business and a successful franchise. Franchising is so unique. So I think it's really important to bring someone like yourself in that has that industry knowledge of the business, the industry, franchising, so that we can best figure out what actually is responsible franchising, what is responsible growth. There's a lot of franchises out there. So we're going to really dive into what is best practices in franchising, if that makes sense, Rob.
It's a great question, and it's definitely a fantastic phrase, and I love it. But like a lot of phrases, like culture or accountability, what does it actually mean? So all I can do is provide my definition of it, and maybe it fits for some people, maybe it doesn't. And I really look at responsible franchising under two components. One is, what is your strategic direction, and are you doing that responsibly? And essentially what that means is, are you really focusing on your unit economics first and foremost as your top priority versus other type of things? That could be sales, that could be something else that's out there. But unit economics really drives everything. And that's really kind of that component of responsible franchising. The second umbrella is a little bit more subjective. And in that category, it's really about the emerging brand space, and that's kind of where I came up, and so that's my niche.
Yeah.
And it's understanding that when you're growing your brand from a franchising growth strategy, that for almost everybody, you don't know what you don't know. It's very complicated. There's a lot of nuances to it. It is 100% doable. But sometimes what happens within the franchising space is that there can be a really powerful brand. It could have great unit economics. They could have the best of intentions and everything kind of in the right place. But then when they get into that growth and they get to store 40 and 50, there are these headwinds on an emerging brand. And I name them. They typically kind of go into technology. That emerging brand is maybe a little bit behind the curve on technology. Their brand, the perception of that brand was set in a core market, but they haven't adapted the brand to move outside that core market. Some of their marketing tactics can be really set towards customer retention because it's based on their corporate stores in the core market. They haven't had to do customer acquisition in a long time, and they don't have those marketing tactics in place. How that brand is managing their finances. A lot of times an emerging brand does what I call hires to cash, which means, I got to go sell more so I can have cash to go hire. But now that you've sold more, you got to hire more people to go support those stores versus hiring to growth. And that means that emerging brand early on needs to have really strong internal financial systems in place. So they're managing their cash. They're projecting out a couple of years. And that's often kind of something new for a lot of emerging brands. And so within responsible franchising, it's understanding those headwinds so that you're not sacrificing the franchisee who has put a lot of trust in you, and they're getting their return on their investment and expectations are managed. And the other part under emerging that I see, and it's hard, it is, but is managing those expectations with those franchisees coming in when, as an emerging brand, you don't know what the expectations are. So that's what kind of all, for me, what responsible franchising means. Are you focusing on your unit economics and understanding that drives everything at the end of the day? Are you using those royalties to invest in your franchise system to drive unit economics? And then if you happen to be in the emerging space, are you resourcing appropriately as whether it's the founder or whoever is kind of in charge of the brand to be proactive in your strategic direction versus reacting to, oh my God, we got to go figure this out.
Right.
So it's a long answer, but it's an important topic that deserves a long answer.
No, it's awesome. And we're going to break down all of those topics, Rob. I appreciate you really do a great job kind of outlining everything at very high levels so that we can really dive into all of those topics. I think really the key in everything, and I tell every candidate I speak to this, it's all about managing expectations. You can talk to as many brokers, as many franchise developers, but once you actually make that investment, you become a business owner, your life is going to change. You've made a huge investment. So our job is helping prepare you for all these expectations, helping you manage things at really each part of the process, because, it's very different when, you may be in corporate America transitioning to franchising. They're going to equip you with all these skills, but helping you understand to the best of your ability what you're going to get with that investment. And in my opinion, I was just at kind of the Titus Center where we're talking about all these different topics, having franchisees, franchisors kind of arguing over these topics. And one of the biggest questions that I kind of hear repetitively is when someone makes that investment into a franchise, what exactly are they getting? You have franchisor, you have franchisee, like a lot of people, they're making this big investment. They expect, where are my customers coming from? Where's the marketing coming from? Where's my social media? So there's kind of all these things where it's like, is it the franchisor's responsibility or is it the franchisee's responsibility? And, my answer is kind of like, it really depends on the franchise. And that's why you have to manage those expectations, because some may be a higher investment. They may do your social media for you, whereas some, that might be the franchisee's responsibility. But Rob, I'd be curious, when you kind of talk about a candidate, they're looking at franchising, it often comes down to, the lead generation, hiring employees, and, obviously what that ROI, that cash flow looks like. But how do they kind of evaluate the different opportunities and figuring out exactly what they're going to get with that investment? Are there questions that they should be asking?
So I'm going to break that down into 2 points that you referenced, because they actually feed into each other. So the first one is expectations. And I tell this story at our approval days. I tell lots of stories, but these are 2 of them. So one is when my wife and I were dating, this boyfriend, girlfriend, not living with each other. We both said we like clean dishes. Who doesn't like a clean dish? We moved in with each other, and it became very apparent that our definition of a clean dish was different. Not good or bad, just different. My wife lets the dishwasher do the work. She got a dirty, put in the dishwasher. I actually kind of clean it in the sink. I put in the dishwasher, and I take a tape measure out, and I'm measuring where things are. Yeah. And when we moved in with each other, and I was kind of earlier on in franchising, it was a little bit of a light bulb moment. I was like, oh, this is like when I'm at approval day. And I'm saying, this is hard. You're responsible for this. You're responsible for this. We're responsible for this. But it was so general. It was like saying, I like a clean dish. So when you start talking about these expectations with the franchisee, you have to get really specific. You can't talk about it in general. You can't say running a business is hard. You can't say managing a team is hard. I talk about managing a team like, imagine this scenario, because this will happen to you. You will have a team going great. You set up a vacation for you and your family, and your manager decides to quit. That happens. That happens.
Right.
That's part of running a business. And so we go into those type of specifics to manage those expectations. Now, when you get into the responsibility of the franchisee and the franchisor, the analogy I use, and you can adapt it based on your brand, is the franchisor's responsibility is to build the car and then ensure that that car is at the leading edge of the market that you're in. So if you're a restaurant, are you on the leading edge of marketing and technology and different type of things? Or are you playing catch up? What that means with that car, and for a franchisee, is that you may be driving a car that you purchased, but 3 years from now, we may be upgrading the car. That may be an upgrade in brand. That could be an upgrade in technology. That means change.
Yeah.
Change is hard for everybody.
Yes.
Here's how we manage change. It will never go perfect. Here's what it looks like. Here's how we handle it. But this is our responsibility as a franchisor. As a franchisee, your responsibility is to drive the car. So how do you staff that car? How do you convert leads that are driven through a marketing strategy into repeat customers? Do you stay the course of the brand standards and the path, or do you tend to kind of go over here and then come back over here, or kind of go over here and then go over there? Human nature. But that's the franchisee's responsibility, not the franchisor's. And again, every franchise is going to have nuances in there, but generally speaking, that's the framework of franchising. So the question becomes for the franchisor, are we upholding our end of the bargain of making sure that that car is at the leading edge? And you have to drop the ego. I'm not perfect. Houndstown isn't perfect. No brand is. There's always room for improvement, and you have to be really diligent about taking a look at your part of the equation and taking a look at the part of the franchisee. What I use, and I got this phrase from David Barr, and I think this is one of the best phrases for franchising in terms of expectations. A franchise model needs to work for the average American with average intelligence, with an average work ethic, and drives a reasonable return on investment. Sometimes in franchising, what you see is what they're selling is the top 30% of their performers. Hey, that's possible, but that's not your average. What you need to do is really speak and look at your systems to the average. Does the average provide that return on investment? And that's where you, from a numbers perspective, that's how you have to analyze your responsibility for that car. The other part of expectations is really speaking to business owners about what does return on investment look like. So franchising is not a quick buck. I tell everybody, if you find a quick buck, please tell me. I'd love to make a quick buck.
Me too.
Yeah, haven't found it, but we love it. And the first couple of years is really hard. Then we go into what is hard about it. We don't just say it's hard, but here's what it looks like. And it's understanding that a franchise agreement, it's a 10-year contract most frequently for a reason, because it takes 10 years to see the full return. Sometimes it's sooner, sometimes it's a little bit longer, but it's like, hey, it takes 3 to 5 years to really get your money back, depending on the brand. And then everything else ends up being icing on the cake. And if you renew for another tier 10, there's another, icing. If the brand is in brick and mortar, sometimes that's sooner. If it is brick and mortar, I mean, every brand's different, but you really have to look at it from that perspective. The other part of expectations that is so massively critical is your FDD. This is a huge part of responsible franchising. The FDD is challenging. It is regulated by the Federal Trade Commission, and they're not looking at it from a certain angle. They're looking at it from their angle. The reality is that as soon as you file your FDD, within a couple of months, it can get out of date. Not materially out of date. So not necessarily you have to go refile, but things have shifted. Something, maybe sales are higher, maybe sales have started to slow, whatever it is, not material, but it's shifted. And so after franchisees sign that FDD, what is your communication to be working with them for them to understand how the brand has kind of shifted? So you can think of somebody, let's say right now it's FDD filing season. April. So let's just say for Houndstown, somebody signed in March. Well, they're signing my 2023 FDD. My 2023 FDD is based on 2022 numbers. So they signed March of 2023, and let's just say they find a location, they get into permitting. I'm making up numbers. Let's say it's 9 months. So it's January now of 2025, and now they're getting into their build out, but they were disclosed on 2022 numbers.
Right.
So you have to lean into managing that expectation with folks. It's not that the franchisor did anything wrong legally, but just because it's legal doesn't mean you don't lean into that communication. And so you want to talk about that in the sales process. You want to talk about that at Discovery Day, and then have some kind of communication platform in where you are speaking about that. Because there's just a lag in that FDD.
No, I appreciate all those points, Rob. That's tremendous insight. And it's really all about managing expectations, and that really is a lesson for anything, not even franchising, but relationship advice that you just mentioned. A good example, I've been very procrastinating to use the app TikTok for a while. I've been on really all the other platforms besides Twitter and TikTok. I just started using Twitter. I actually love it. I think it's really cool. But TikTok, I've just been procrastinating for so long. So I told my sister, I'll have you run the TikTok. I'll compensate you for it based on, a referral program. But we weren't very clear with the expectation. So I know what I want. She knows what she wants. And we kind of just started. Then, a week, 2 weeks go by, and, I'm yelling at her over, why aren't there posts up for the last 3 days, for example? And she's like, well, there weren't really clear expectations. So I totally agree. No matter what it is, relationship advice, family advice, business advice, starting with those clear set expectations so that you should know what you're going to get, especially in franchising. You're making this huge investment. You should have a very good idea of what those expectations look like and what those first 6 months look like, the first 24 months, 5 years, 10 years down the line. I think those are all really great points, Robin. One of the things I'm kind of thinking, as you mentioned, like April is kind of like the FDD season. Do you think there's like, if you want to look at like the most updated numbers, kind of tell like the most updated picture, is there like a best time to inquire on franchising? Like, should you be inquiring around like April season, May, when you're going to get like those most updated numbers, or does it not totally matter as much? What are your thoughts?
I think it always matters.
Yeah.
So part of what I don't do it anymore. It was one of those random things. I had a friend that was looking at a franchise. So I kind of just, hey, look at these things. Here's how you read an FDD. And then he had a friend. And before I knew it, I was not a broker in any capacity, but just kind of an educator.
Right.
Just kind of lucked into it. And so what I recommended to anybody looking at a franchise is first you have to understand that the franchisor cannot give you any numbers that are not in that FDD. So maybe your sales numbers are actually 20% higher. You're signing in March of 2023. You're looking at 2022 numbers. You want to see newer numbers.
Yeah.
But the franchisor legally cannot tell you those numbers. So really, how do you use your peer review validation calls? That's where you go as a prospect to say, hey, I saw these numbers. How are you doing right now? Are you up year over year? Are you down? How's your profitability? Is it growing? Is it not? Being proactive, understanding that the franchisor, they can't. And if they do, that's a big red flag. If you're getting close to when an FDD is filed, it's a perfectly legitimate question. Hey, when is this brand looking to file their next FDD? And if you're getting close, it's a decision. Hey, I'm just going to wait to get the new FDD. I want to get redisclosed. But what you have to look at is if you're in a registration state, then you may go dark, which means you have to wait longer, which is just a nuance you have to work through. And then sometimes a franchisor, especially if a brand is growing, may be putting things in the new FDD. Maybe they're raising the royalty. Maybe there's a new fee, something along these lines, and you're motivated to get under a different agreement with less fees. It's a judgment call, but that's something a prospect should be considering, especially, but I think it's a perfectly legit question. Hey, when do you file your next FDD? Yeah. And if you know it's April and you're coming in March or February, January, whenever it may be, is to kind of just understand this is about the time where the franchisor may be updating their numbers. And again, lean into those peer review calls. Don't just ask about franchise support is critical, technology, ask all those questions, but also ask about the numbers. Yeah. Would you do this again? Are you getting the return on investment? How's your sales growth? Sometimes people don't want to speak to specific profitability numbers. It's very private to them. But it's perfectly legit to say, is your profitability growing each year? It's a very, you'll get really good answers by just asking that question.
That's super helpful, Robin. As I'm thinking about kind of a lot of candidates that I kind of deal with, and I'm sure a lot of, franchise developers, brokers, candidates are trying to figure out what that ROI, what that potential financial investment could look like. They're making this large investment, and you alluded to, it's not going to be easy in most cases. Business ownership is definitely not for everyone, but on episode 1, Dennis Schooley alluded to 70% of people have considered business ownership. So I know most people are at least considering business ownership. It takes something to at least hit that initial inquiry into franchising. So there must be some part of you that wants something more, whether it's for yourself, for your family. Maybe you're just looking for that next steps. But, a lot of people, they come in wanting some change, but they say, they're not willing to leave their 9-to-5 position. They want to actually know what that income's going to look like. Some people even come in saying, I want to do something just on the weekends and replace my income. And, just as a business owner, I know firsthand, it takes at least 6 to 24 months to ramp up any business if you want to get any meaningful results, in my opinion. So I'd be curious, you're a candidate, we're talking about managing expectations. You're a candidate thinking about franchising. You've kind of thrown out that initial inquiry, but you're trying to kind of evaluate FDD, is franchising for me, that ROI. What is how do you kind of balance all this information you're getting at once? You mentioned the FDD, you're looking at the financials. Beforehand, you didn't even know what an FDD was.
Oh.
But how do you kind of balance all this information through this process to see whether they want to stick in corporate America or whether that franchising path could eventually be satisfactory for them?
So the way I talk about that is, and I wouldn't even call it pros and cons. It's information. And you as a franchisee need this information to make the most right decision for you. So what a lot of franchisees, and it's what I speak to, is like semi-active. Semi-active is easier to sell. Hands down. Wait, I can keep my corporate job and go open up this franchise and be semi-active. That's fantastic. But you really need to understand what semi-active really means. So when we talk about it at Houndstown, and in fact, this is actually in my next FDD, is that even if you are semi-active, you need to be in the business for the first 90 days. I forget exactly what I put in, but it's like 3 to 5 days a week, even if you're opening with that manager. So if you open semi-active, a nice part of that is you can still maybe go work another job that hopefully has a lot of flexibility and vacation time and gives you that ability to put in a lot of work in the beginning. And you have a revenue stream coming in. That's fantastic. That's good. But on the flip side, what if you've never hired a manager before? You hire one, you pay for them to go to training.
Right.
That manager's working for you, running all your day-to-day while you're at your other job. And then 4 months into it, the manager moves, gets married, gets pregnant, quits. Who knows? They move on.
Right.
Now, you as the business owner that has this other job have to now come into your business. And that can create some challenges. And I see a lot of that. Again, it's managing expectations. When you get into construction and the first 6 months of your store opening, different for every brand, and your experience within business and managing teams, but it's a full-time job in and of itself, hands down.
Yeah.
The other part about semi-active that people underestimate is how involved you need to be in your local market to drive more of those leads. The brand may be driving leads through a digital campaign, but you need to be the CEO of your own business and be promoting it locally. And that's different. Houndstown, a restaurant, how big is the brand? What's the brand awareness? There's a lot of components.
Yeah.
But you got to have a presence. And so you have to understand those parts about semi-active. And your return on investment is going to be out further because you're paying a manager out of the gate. Owner-operator, it's kind of the opposite. Owner-operator, you don't have that other revenue stream coming in from working a 9 to 5.
Right.
Your return on investment is going to be sooner because you're working in your store. You're not paying out that salary. You're learning the ins and outs of your business from day one. We all know this from leadership. If your team recognizes that they know more than you do, the respect can get a little tricky.
Yeah.
On the flip side, you don't want to get locked into working in your business. You want to be out there working on your business. And again, those are just things that we speak to in terms of that decision that a franchisee is making. I'm not, my opinion, it's not good or bad, or there's better or worse. as long as those expectations are managed. I've seen as a franchisor, somebody come in as semi-active, they have this other job, they take vacation for their opening, the opening gets pushed back 2 weeks, they can't get the vacation, and now they can't be at their opening. That's a problem.
Yeah.
I've seen semi-active where they've come in, they have their job. Example I gave you, they have that manager quits, but they're working another job, and now they have to come into their store and work, a shift every day. That can create some stress.
Yeah.
So it's going into these things with your eyes wide open to make the most right decision for you and your family.
No, that's really helpful, Rob. And I would be curious, I want to kind of like really break down like the semi-active and kind of like the realities of what that actually looks like for someone that could potentially be considering. Obviously, it sounds like there's a lot of risks in terms of if you are trying to keep your 9-to-5 position, there's a lot of kind of external factors, it sounds like, to be able to, acquire that kind of semi-active ownership role. Is there like a certain candidate that you think is actually able to do something like this? Whereas, to someone that maybe just making, 100K, the margins probably aren't necessarily there to be able to hire like a general manager in that place. Is there like a certain level of candidate where you can actually have the resources to hire a general manager and it doesn't necessarily cut from the bottom line? You're kind of acquiring that profit.
All depends on the brand.
Yeah.
So if the brand is primarily semi-active or even absentee, those are the numbers you're going to see in your FDD. But typically in an FDD, you don't see them classified by owner, operator, semi-active, absentee. It's organized differently. Yeah. So again, those are questions you need to ask during your peer review calls. For our brand, Houndstown, this is just how we talk about it. There's a lot of different ways. When we talk about an owner operator out of the gate, and we have franchisees designate this in the development process. And what we're saying is, owner operator, you are coming into that business when it first opened and you're working on shift. Yes, you may have shift leads, you may have an assistant manager, whatever that looks like, but you are there as the owner and the operator of that business. Semi-active is you are hiring a manager before you open, and you're bringing that manager, a designated manager in the FDD language, and that designated manager is going through training with you. So you're going to have that type of salary on your books. And again, it's different for everybody. The biggest part I will speak to is if you don't have experience hiring a younger generation, managing and leading a younger generation, there can sometimes be a learning curve there. If you have some experience with that learning curve tends to, but not always, be less.
Yeah, and I think these are all really, really great points, Robin. Something as, you're a candidate considering franchising. A lot of times candidates that come in, they just say, show me the best opportunities. But it's like, it really is based upon your strengths, your weaknesses, your goals. Really, what are you looking for? Because how are you going to drive the car? Right, exactly.
My analogy with semi-active is, because I'm married, I have a kid.
Okay.
And for a franchisee opening up their own business, it's like having a kid. If you just had a kid, would you go to a nanny that you're paying X amount of dollars and say, raise my kid? No. But if you do, yeah, I judge that as a parent. You're going to be heavily involved in all that. Now, as a parent, maybe you have an au pair, maybe you have a nanny, maybe you're doing it all on your own, maybe there's babysitters, who knows? Yeah. But a healthy parenting, you're going to be heavily involved in the raising of your kids. What are the values? What are the boundaries? All those different type of things. I sometimes see semi-active people come in and they're handing their baby to a manager and saying, grow my business.
Yeah.
Yeah, that can it work? Sure. Does it work often? I haven't seen it. The involvement is big. Now, when you get into a franchisee that comes in and they own other franchises, They're adding something to their portfolio. They have their system in place. That's a different scenario. So in a lot of this semi-active thing, I apply also to, you didn't ask this question, but I'm going to throw it in there because I think it's applicable.
Do it.
I apply that also to multi-unit ownership with franchisees. Again, not from a good or bad, better or worse, but from an educative perspective. A lot of franchisees will come in, buy the multi-unit from a fear of missing out, but never end up developing those units. And so leaning into that transparency and conversation about the pros and cons around multi-unit, I also highly recommend.
No, yeah, I think those are really great points, Robin. Just let's say like this doesn't exist, but let's say someone starts like this new franchising of circuses or something, and you hate clowns, for example, and you hate children. Like, even though they could be making $10 million a year, for example, like if you don't like what's actually part of that business, it just doesn't make sense. Like if you hate animals, Houndstown probably doesn't make the most sense. If you hate,
we're not the right fit for sure.
Right. If you hate your grandmother, like senior care may not be the best option either. But trying to figure out the type of employee you like dealing with, whether it's a white collar, a blue collar, that type of age range, because if you're starting a business, you don't even know what that business is, you're trying to learn the business, to have the most credibility, you want to actually be able to know the ins and outs of that business, to be able to hire those employees, to delegate that work to. So I'd be kind of curious, as you kind of talk about the semi-active, kind of putting that general manager in place for like a particular type of candidate. Do you have like programs in place so that general manager is like incentivized to also grow, or is it kind of just like their typical like salaried employee and they could be gone the next day or something?
Joint employer. I cannot, as a franchisor, dictate any of that, nor would I, because there's joint employer. It's the franchisee's team member. Now, absolutely, we provide best practices and resources on deferred compensation plans and how do you motivate a manager and how do you kind of structure this, but there's no right or wrong. Everybody does things differently. But yes, we provide best practices, but we would never go to a franchisee and say, here's how you have to compensate your manager to make this be better. So joys of the legalities of franchising.
No, that's super helpful, Robin. I'd be curious, as someone that, you literally started off as a minimum wage employee at Dot Popcorn, worked your way up, became the COO, and it's literally now the CEO of a major successful franchise opportunity that you've really taken from an emerging brand to a successful brand. For a candidate, they come in, they see like a really cool story like yourself, someone that, you got your hands dirty, you worked your way up. And people can say, that's awesome, but someone kind of say like they don't want to get their hands dirty. Do you think, it's helpful to actually learn the ins and outs of the business to be able to, in the long run, have more success? Or do you think you can have just as much success where it's like you kind of just want to start to delegate right away, if that makes sense?
It's a very good question. Again, there's kind of two very general categories here. So if I have a franchisee coming in and they own 3 sports clips and 2 teriyaki madnesses and they're coming in, well, that's a different conversation with that franchisee. They've built up an infrastructure, and I want to make sure that infrastructure is in place, but that franchisee is not necessarily going to learn the ins and outs of the business. They have the team that's going to learn the ins and outs of the business, and that's kind of a different category. And in terms of your audience, that category is not necessarily probably using what's called franchise brokers. They've kind of learned the industry. But over primarily in this other category, yes, I would tell any franchise owner that's coming in, you need to know the ins and outs of your business today and 10 years from now.
Yeah.
Because if that manager were to move on, you got to step in. So even for me coming up at Dot Popcorn, the founder of Dot Popcorn, Rob Israel, at any point, if I had quit or moved on, would have had no problem stepping in and running. Would he had to learn a few details, or where did Rob save this and what was going on here? Sure.
Right.
But he could do it in his sleep. And I always knew that. And I respected that. The founder, Jackie, here at Houndstown, if I got hit by a bus tomorrow, I like to think people would miss me, but she could step in, no problem. And kind of, you may have to resource and, figure out a few things. That's good. That's healthy. No business can be so connected to one team member that has all the knowledge of how to run that business. You have to inspect what you expect. You have to be involved in the business to a certain degree, because if that team member moves on or something happens, you don't miss a beat. And I have seen it where that manager moves on or something, and now the business goes backwards.
Right.
Now you have to turn it around. That takes time. So all those things are very, very important things to consider before kind of going in and buying the franchise.
No, I appreciate that, Rob. And I kind of building off that as, the CEO, part of your responsibility is, building the team, the resources around you. And, Houndstown is a very successful opportunity. You guys have a really strong culture, a team around you. You've done a really great job of building a successful team. And for a lot of people entering the world of franchising, although some people, they have management skills, maybe they've managed a team 10, some people have managed hundreds of people, but it's still, they have a corporate ladder. They might not actually be the ones building, delegating, doing the job interviews, for example. Can you talk someone through like your recruitment process a little bit? Like, what are like those initial steps to find qualified, or I guess attract candidates to yourself, find those qualified candidates, and how do you, ensure they are a cultural fit as you're opening up a new franchise? You're you want to be successful, but it's like, how do you ensure that these people are just as passionate as yourself about the business?
So how does a franchisee attract team members, or how does Houndstown look to attract franchisees?
Yeah, I was looking at it from the franchisee perspective. If
Great
they make that
question.
investment, what that would look like to help them build a team, as we're kind of talking about managing expectations. It's really hard to actually build, grow, scale, motivate a team. So I'd be curious from your perspective about that.
We really lean heavily into training on that aspect. I tell any franchisee, when you don't join a franchise, yes, there should be robust training on a lot of different facets, but you're not necessarily getting an MBA in leadership or finances or different things, but you're going to get a really good training. And if you need a resource around that, that's you driving the car, and that's what you would need to do. So when it comes to building a team, what we train and kind of really encourage our franchisees to do first and foremost is to develop their own internal why statement and value statement. It's not externally facing. Customers are not going to see it. But maybe for you're Josh, you're opening up Josh's franchise, whatever it is. And what motivates you, your why statement is giving back to the community. So you develop your own why statement there. And then you have your own values, and you develop those values. And then what we encourage our franchisees, again, I'm going to be very clear here. None of this is required. These are best practices. We're not getting into joint employer in any capacity. But we'd say, hey, in this day and age, job ads are really boring. They are HR, legal, and they don't capture the heart of the business. And the magic of franchising is that it's a locally owned and operated business.
Right.
So when you're out there hiring, you can't be fishing and just waiting for people to come in. You have to be hunting. And a way to hunt is with your job ad. Lead with your job ad, with your mission statement and your values, then get into the specific legalities and HR things that you have to do as a business owner. And hire to your mission and values as much as you're hiring to the requirements of the job and what it needs to do. Then when it gets into managing that team, we go into first a training on how to understand this generation that's coming up. So every generation thinks the generation that's coming up is lazy.
Yeah.
They do.
Yeah.
And we put up a quote from Aristotle that says the generation that's coming up, the bearded youth, are lazy. That was hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of years ago.
I love it.
So they're not lazy, but they experience the world differently and they communicate differently. The way I came up, a job was a job. I came in and I did it. If I got a high five once every 5 years, great. Never expected it. My high five was my paycheck.
Right.
It's just different now. It's not good or bad. So you, as a new business owner, you need to be the mentor and the coach and come at. Now, I'm not saying you lower your standards. I'm not saying you lower any of that, but how you train to those standards is different than it was 20 years ago. And we train our franchisees on ways to understand this generation. Then we go into specific tactics on how to lead a team, because often training can be very philosophical and you need that as the foundation. But what franchisees need are tactics. Taking this, putting it directly into my business, and I will see success. So, and then taking those tactics in how they lead their team, having team meetings, all those different things, again, best practices. We're very upfront with any franchisee in the sales process, development process, signing the FTD, moving into their opening, of really stressing what we call is that every franchisee is on a journey to freedom. Every franchisee wants to be free. Free from corporate America, financial freedom, freedom of time, freedom to give to the community, freedom to leave a legacy. Falls into different categories, but they have a dream of being free. And to accomplish that dream, you have to have a team. And here is how you can develop your own team to create this dream you want to create.
That's really helpful, Rob. I appreciate
easier
that.
said than done. It's not. It takes time, and it takes nuances, and there's all kinds of things to it. And I typically see it takes 2 to 3 years to really fully understand the business, then start kind of growing it to a different perspective.
No, that's really helpful, Rob. And a lot of kind of when I think about people making that transition to potentially becoming a franchisee, I kind of I'll relate a lot of it back to their internal confidence and trying to figure out, they have this set of skills right now that they've developed in corporate America, doing other things, but how can they kind of get that confidence that the training programs are going to equip them with the skills to be able to do something like managing a team, to follow a marketing playbook, for example. I think with the name of the podcast being Conquer the Mind, a lot of it ultimately comes down to the confidence and the mindset of those people, because, as we know, that you kind of alluded to with the Mentor Bar, they create these systems for the average American with the average work ethic. But, from an outside perspective, it seems like you need to know every skill in the book to be able to have success in business ownership. How do you think someone can leverage the confidence that they currently have with the training programs of a franchise system to be able to think, maybe this is for me?
So the analogy I use with this, it's like any dream that you're looking to pursue. So let's just say, hypothetically, it was a dream I had in high school. I didn't have the natural gifts to be an all-star basketball player.
Okay, I'm with you there.
Yeah. But let's say my dream is to play basketball at a Division III school. And I can go through basketball camps and I can watch the videos and I can go do a whole lot of different things. But that's not going to get me to my dream.
Right.
What I have to go do is go play basketball. What I have to go do is take the reps. I have to get into the gym. I got to eat well. I have to go hit 1,000 foul shots every single day. And that will get me towards my dream. Now, I can't control my natural talent. So I'm not going to worry about it. There's nothing I can do. I can't worry about talent. You have what you have. but I can develop what I have. And so I don't want to say hard, but a part for a franchisee is understanding that if this is where I need to go, hey, average is here. And if I kind of just put in X amount of reps and I do this and I put in the average, I'm going to get the average results. And the hope is that those average results still provide a reasonable return on the investment. But if I want to be more than average, I got to put in the time and the effort like any human does. This isn't franchisee versus franchisor. This is life.
Yeah.
You got to go put in the time. And sometimes that ends up being more than what some individuals expect because nobody can predict how much time. I could go in and think, oh, to get to the Division III school, I got to hit 500 foul shots every day. So that's what I go do. And then if I find out, oh, that's not getting the results, I got to go do 1,000 now. Maybe 1,000 doesn't get me the results. Maybe I have to hit 1,500 a day. Now I start seeing the results.
Yeah.
And it's just kind of playing with that Conquer the Mind. I love the title. It's dealing with that aspect of it. And I think that's kind of a piece of franchising that just doesn't always, it's hard to speak about. It's incredibly subjective. But there is such a powerful psychological growth curve for any person who is putting themselves on the leading edge of discomfort. It's going to challenge you. It's going to push you into places and make you see things in yourself. Like anything in life, when you put yourself on the leading edge of discomfort, you're going to grow. And that's not always a smooth process. And so part of when you go into this dream of franchising, it's also understanding that what you're committing yourself to is your own personal growth, and that it will often open up things in yourself that you weren't always aware of. And that's the same for any human on this planet when we commit ourselves to that sort of journey.
No, Rob, that's fascinating right there. And I'm curious right now, I know you have a very strong psychology background in college, so I'd be curious. No?
I do. I studied psychology in grad school. My wife is a psychologist, but I make a point to tell her almost every single day that there's a reason I didn't pursue it. She'll come and she'll be talking about one of her clients or something. I'm like, yeah. She's like, oh, you studied it. And I'm like, well, that was 20 years ago, and there's a reason I didn't pursue it because I think I may have told it on the last podcast. My joke is I studied psychology to be a therapist.
Yeah.
And I didn't pursue it because I didn't like listening to people's problems all day long. So I got into franchising where I listened to people's problems all day long.
Yeah. No, I love
it's a very different type of communication. It's business. It's a franchisor-franchisee relationship. It's professional. None of my conversations really ever go into a psychological therapeutic component. What's your trauma? What was your relationship with your parents? I don't touch that. But I think maybe where you're getting to is that I do believe, it's my opinion, I'm not, don't flame me on LinkedIn when I say this, but it's my personal opinion that there is absolutely a emotional component to this journey that is a very real, because a lot of what that emotion starts speaking to is fear. And ultimately, when we talk about freedom, what we're really talking about, financial freedom, freedom from corporate America, we're talking about we want to be free from fear.
Right.
We want to create a life where we don't feel fear. We want to create a life where I'm not afraid that the corporation is just going to fire me after I put in 20 years.
Right.
I don't want to wake up worried about money. I want to create something for my family because I'm afraid that they may forget me. So when we really break down journeys to freedom and we really break down what we're looking to be free from, it is incredibly emotional. So as the franchisor, and there's no right or wrong, I can't stress that enough, Every brand's going to be a little bit different.
Mm-hmm.
But I think subconsciously what the brands kind of end up finding themselves is, well, man, leaning into that type of emotion, that's really challenging.
Yeah.
This isn't even, a franchisee doesn't report to me. It's a very nuanced relationship. I'm going to lean a little bit more into brand standards and the processes and critical. What we try to lean into is the tension between those two paths. It's not necessarily always the easiest, but it's definitely much more powerful. And those two, it's leaning into the emotion and the fear and how these individual franchisees are navigating that. And there's only so much my team or myself can lean into that conversation. But it's understanding that is the first step. And you have to have your brand standards and your systems and follow this playbook, and you will do 1 and 2 and you will get 3, and leading into that tension. I think that also applies to the franchisor. I think the franchisor is on its own journey. I think the franchisor is looking to be free. I think team members as part of the franchisor are also kind of part of that emotional component, because they're working really hard and they care and they love. And sometimes you get negativity within franchising. And I definitely have experienced that myself. Sometimes expectations were mismanaged, but the franchisee feels like there was a broken promise. And that's a phrase I use frequently. There's a difference between mismanaged expectations and a broken promise. But if one individual feels like a promise was broken, now you don't have trust. And how does your team navigate that? There's a lot of emotion in this career we've either chosen or fell into because we know the alphabet.
Ties back to the.
I had to bring a full circle after I pontificated for a couple minutes.
No, I think that's really helpful. I know the hour is starting to wind down now, and this has been a lot of fun. And one of the things I was kind of curious about when I was asking about your psychology background a little bit, just because you've seen a lot of people, transition to become successful franchise owners. You've probably seen people that maybe not even successful franchise owners, as you've been at countless different franchises. You've been to the IFA, you've heard the same stories that I have, where there's success stories, there's horror stories. So our job is to help you manage expectations, just like any industry. There's thousands of great apples, but there's thousands of bad apples as well. So, I was just on a call with a candidate yesterday, and she was trying to ask the difference between a franchise broker and a real estate broker, and why she needed a franchise broker to show her the franchise industry. And my point was, you're welcome to use whatever route you want, do whatever Google research you want. The asterisk with Google research is it's very much pay the play, if you will, where
correct,
you can only kind of hedge it to a certain extent. And really, as you kind of alluded to earlier, you don't know what you don't know. Like, franchising is its own industry. It's so complex. So I think it's just really important if you're not in the franchising industry, even when you first get started in the franchising industry, there's so much to learn. So it's really cool opportunity. And although I always allude to, there's so many good apples and so many bad apples. Once you go to, the IFA, the conferences, these events, you continually see all the good apples over and over again. You start to realize, wow, although franchising creates hundreds of millions of jobs, there's only you start to see the same people at all these conferences, events. So, once you start to get into the franchising industry, you'll start to hear similar names over and over again, similar references, connections. So I think, it's just been such an amazing world for myself personally. I've seen it change my family's life. So really, the goal is just to help educate people on the different opportunities. So I think this has been a lot of fun, just diving into responsible franchising, kind of helping people manage those expectations, because it's so overwhelming kind of looking at the franchising industry, seeing the McDonald's, the Subway, Taco Bell, but not realizing, 1 in 8 businesses at this point, I think, is a franchise business. And I can't even imagine what those numbers will look like over the next decade. So I think that's just really, really powerful. And Rob, one of the things that I want to dive into kind of as a final point, one of the things we talked about on the previous episode, I'm big onto this idea of mentorship, conquering the mind. I think if you find the right mentor, it can really fast track your process to growth. And one of the things I kind of asked you about is kind of proactively seeking a mentor. will they like come and find you? And you made a really great point, something I really agree with about. You need to focus on learning those different skills. You really don't know what that step 100 was going to be. You probably didn't know you'd be CEO of Houndstown a decade ago, for example.
No.
You just kept.
I was happy just running the popcorn store. Yes, it was. Yeah, I wasn't making a lot of money, but my dating life was challenged. It's hard to go on a date and somebody says, "Hey, what do you do?" And I'm like, "I run a popcorn store. I'm next to the Sunglass Hut. Let's go get a pretzel." But yeah, I think with mentorship, and again, this is something to ask. We don't have it in place today. We're putting it in place this year. But as the brand can start getting a little bit larger, does it have a specific peer-to-peer program? And those can look very differently, and they can evolve based on the size of the brand. And don't expect that necessarily if the brand has 10 units or 20 units. We're at 62. We're just putting it in place. But those mentorship programs can be really powerful on two fronts. One, you're utilizing some of your more mature franchisees, and call a spade a spade. A franchisee is going to listen to another franchisee more than they're going to listen to the franchisor sometimes. That's just human nature. That's nothing wrong with that. And to be proactive with that communication to ensure that the voice of the people who have gotten over the hump is very loud and present is powerful for your brand. Because if the other voice where it's new and I'm scared and that voice gets really loud and you need to honor it, but if that's the only voice, that will become the story.
Right.
So the franchisor has to be aware of these things from a communication perspective. And that peer-to-peer program is very, very powerful. And then the franchisee is able to hear from somebody who has walked in their shoes. Oh, I had a team member quit. Oh, I thought I was going to get to cash flow positive at this time, and it actually took me 6 months later. Hey, I'm going through interest rates being higher. I also have an SBA loan. I was cash flow positive, and now I'm not. This is how I'm handling it. That type of communication and mentorship program can be very, very powerful. And then as your brand gets bigger, you can create, and we're not there yet, but you can have mastermind, it's kind of one of those cliched words, but you can have mastermind groups, you can have performance groups. There's a lot of different things that a brand can do to provide that mentorship.
That's really interesting. Yeah, and I guess I know the hour's wound down, so I don't want to hold you any longer.
Oh, no. I'm free.
All right, that's super.
I'm filing my FDD. I'm giving myself a couple hours but whatever your time is, I'm good.
All right. Awesome, Rob. I appreciate that. I think one of the things I'd be curious about as you're kind of breaking down those points between the franchisee, speaking to other franchisees, they're kind of going through the validation part of the process. And, they talk to other franchise owners, and you kind of alluded to, you talk to a franchise owner and they may say, I expected to break even at month X, but it took an extra couple months. As candidates go through the process, I think a lot of candidates are just kind of looking for reasons to say no rather than kind of totally evaluating the pros and cons of their current position versus franchise ownership, because it's definitely not all pros towards being a business owner. It's a lot of work.
That's not for everybody.
Yeah. Do you think
there's no shame if it's not for you? And I think sometimes in the sales process that's missed. A person feels like, oh, I don't go do this. It means I'm afraid. It means I'm scared. It means I'm not courageous because I'm not going after this thing. And I would be the first one to say that's 100% not the truth. You can pursue that growth, and maybe that's within business ownership, but maybe it's in another place. There is absolutely nothing wrong with saying that franchising isn't for you or business ownership isn't for you. It's not for everybody. Right. And that's okay.
Yeah.
It's really that's that psychology of this discovery that I think any prospect is really kind of going through is like there's a voice inside of them saying there's something more, I don't know what it is, but there's something more I want to do in my life. And I think it's business ownership. And it may be, but it may not be.
Right.
That's okay. You can still find that thing, that's something more. It just may not be within business ownership.
Yeah, no, and I think that's really the goal. And one of the things I always tell candidates when they're going through the process, whether it's brokers, other franchise developers, do you feel like you're being sold the information or just told the information? Because, you know, these guys, they're looking for, it really is a two-way relationship between the franchisor and the franchisee. So they're evaluating, you know, potential franchise owners like yourself just as much as, you know, candidate is evaluating the franchisor as well. So it really will be a two-way relationship as you go through this process. And the key being is that at the end of the day, you go through the process, it very well may not be for you. It may not align with your goals, your family's goals for the future. But the goal is that if you have even slightly considered business ownership, we're going to show you the universe so that you can make that educated decision on your future, which I think is the most powerful thing because, you know, whether you have analysis paralysis, we're going to give you the necessary information so that you can be confident on that decision. And Rob, one kind of like final question, as a candidate, they're talking to the franchisees during the validation part. The franchise owner, they're like, I wanted to break even at month X. It took an extra couple months. Do you think, how does a candidate evaluate that information where they were told something going in, but it was a little bit different once they made that investment? Should a candidate, you know, is that a turnoff right away, or should they really evaluate the reasoning why that stuff happened?
Yeah. So this is a great question, and I will do my best to keep it tight and quick.
Yeah, I know the hour was winding down,
but no, perfect. But it's a very, very good question.
Yeah.
And again, I use stories.
I love your stories.
So this isn't in the sales process, but this is with a current franchisee and going into build out. And heard, similar to how you may hear something on validation. We just had our reunion. He's like, I talked to this group of franchisees and they're not opening up to the median. And he just, which is true. And he's hearing that. And it's absolutely true. And so, but what I did was like, I pull up our data and our monthly reporting to them. I'm like, yes, that is true. But look at this. They have lower rents. They have this going on. I'm not going to go in and name any names. But there's sometimes operational things going on at a location that you may not be aware of because nobody's going to volunteer that, but I'm aware of it. I'm never going to call out anybody, but you always have to consider. Look at these other stores. They're above the median of these different things. So within that context, when you're talking, a prospect is going on a validation call and they're hearing break even took longer, whatever. Why do you think it took longer? Did you get a mismanaged expectation or did you get a broken promise? And again, I'm not saying a prospect uses those words, but a broken promise is the franchisor said you will be cash flow positive in 6 months after opening. That's a promise. A mismanaged expectation is we can't guarantee when you're going to be break even. It depends on how you finance your business. Are you getting an SBA loan today? It's going to be longer. Are you semi-active? It's going to be longer. What's your rent? That can affect when you get there. Did you price appropriately? I can't dictate what a franchisee charges. But if a franchisee is a new business owner and they are undercharging for their services, that's going to get that. That's going to affect. So there's a lot of factors in that.
Right.
And so bringing those questions onto a validation call is really appropriate to try to kind of understand, is it mismanaged expectation? Is it a broken promise? When they talk about break even, there's two different numbers. This is critical. And I'm trying to keep it tight. Break even is just saying that your net income is covering your operating expenses. Cash flow positive is really saying all the cash that goes out of my business is covered by my business. So if you have an SBA loan, which has, that's cash. The franchisor is looking more often at break even because that's the business model. How you financed it and how you run it and what you run through the business. Maybe you put a car through it. Maybe you don't for taxes. Maybe you're paying yourself a salary before you should be paying yourself a salary, whatever it is. That's kind of the cash flow number, the EBITDA number. And that's a different component. So being specific on break even versus cash flow positive, they're two very different numbers speaking to a similar thing.
No, I appreciate that, Rob. I think that I wanted to really get that question. And as I was kind of hearing you talk, I thought that would be super helpful. But I know the hour, 70 minutes at this point has definitely wound down. At this point, Rob and I have spoken for 2 hours. So if you're not sick of us, maybe we'll keep them going for you guys, but I had a great time.
Let's get to 1 million. I like the challenge.
Let's do it. If we get to 1 million, then I'll definitely throw something special in for someone. But I always like to kind of just put my takeaways at the very end. And some of my big takeaways were not sacrificing the franchise owner. The franchisor has built the system over decades. And one thing I'd be curious, I guess the episode's over, but I'm always curious between having corporate locations and then franchisee-owned locations, and kind of using those corporate locations to kind of test maybe a new strategy or something like that, so that you're not using franchise owners to kind of test these new concepts, but using the corporate locations to test something, and understanding it's a two-way relationship. The franchisors are looking for the franchisees' feedback just as much as the other way around, so that, as you alluded to with your car analogy, which I love, because franchisor, they're going to build the structure, the systems, the support, but it's up to you what you do with driving that car. How fast do you want to take it? How slow do you want to take it? Do you want to make a right turn, a left turn? They're going to equip you with the skills so that you can take your career, your family to that next level. But it's overall what you do with that gas pedal, with that brake, how far, how slow you want to take that opportunity. And I also
the key point on that, because this is really critical, because it is this two-way street. It applies to both the franchisor and the franchisee, both. Franchisee is the car's not going as fast as they wanted it to. They have to drop the ego. Is it how I'm driving the car? Or legitimately, is the car not what it needs to be?
Right.
Franchisor has to do the same. Hey, we're seeing a lot of cars not going as fast as they needed to do. Is it the franchisee? They're legitimately not driving it fast enough. Are we not attracting the right people in?
Yeah.
And the franchisor has to drop the same ego and then say, what about this car do we maybe need to upgrade? Goes both ways.
Right.
And the way I talk about that, again, I know we're on time.
No, I love it. I've got time.
And again, this is hard. This sounds subjective, but the language I use within the franchisor-franchisee relationship is that ideally we're working in a sense of partnership, and that word gets bandied around. This is what it means to me. Yeah, is that we are working together to raise the first and foremost the business asset value of the unit store, which will raise the business asset value of the franchisor. Doesn't mean we agree all the time. It doesn't mean there aren't disagreements. It doesn't mean anything, but we're working in this sense of partnership. And that so much of that goes into managing expectations. Right. If the relationship moves into what I call customer, and I know often if we're there in an individual relationship, when the franchisee may say, I pay your salary. Okay, we're in customer. A customer relationship is I give you money, you provide this service. It's a component of the franchise relationship for sure. But that's where the relationship is 90% of the way. You're spending all of your time just in here. It works. Not ideal. The third component is contractual. And that is getting into legalities, and that's getting into brand standards manuals and defaults. And so we talk about those three components of the relationship at approval day, because everything you're just speaking to is about doing everything you can to be as much as possible within that sense of partnership. Then you can truly, both parties drop the ego and can say, hey, I'm not driving the car as well as I could, but the car could be better. Right. And sometimes, if not often, that's the case.
Yeah, I think those are really great points. Just dropping the ego, I think, is really important and something that everyone really does struggle with, myself included. But it's just,
we're human.
Yeah,
franchisor is as human as the franchisee.
Yeah, exactly. And I think just the idea of having that open relationship, saying, I might have made a mistake here. What could I have done better? Just having that open dialogue, that two-way feedback loop really leads to the ultimate success of both parties, because franchisor success is really based off the franchisee, and the franchisees, a lot of their success is dictated from the franchisor. So you're going to go through that process. We're going to help you evaluate, manage expectations to the best of our ability. And then at the end of the day, it may be for you, it may not be for you, but we're going to help you manage those expectations. And one of my kind of final takeaways I like having, just when you start into a franchise, even if you want to be somewhat semi-active, you have the capital to put that general manager in place who's motivated to grow that business. Still want 90 days with that manager learning the business, because as you alluded to, you don't know what happens to that manager. They get pregnant, they find another opportunity. You really have no idea what will happen. But it all goes back to your point about building a team and hiring internally. It all starts with your why. What is your mission statement? What are your values? That's how you really attract candidates. It starts off with knowing exactly what you want so that you can go out there and find those like-minded people. So I think, Rob, I really like that point. And my final takeaway is just the idea that franchising is about a journey to freedom, whether it's financial, lifestyle, impact, having that legacy, your family. It really is about having that journey to freedom. Business ownership, you can ask any business ownership. It's not easy, but it's so much fun. And I can't imagine life any other way, in my opinion. So, Rob, I appreciate you joining me on episode 30.
It's always a great time. Thank you, Josh.
I have a Conquer the Mind theme song to end us off using some hard rock. Hear it?
I can. Yeah. It has a nice 80s vibe to it.
Yeah. I use AI technology to incorporate the 80s that I know you like with the franchising and Conquer the Mind. So this could be the new theme song going forward.
It sounds like a band called Europe.
Yeah, it's just like a 30-second clip.
Oh, yeah, it's got the nice little solo right there. Yeah. This could be a hit in the 80s. This wasn't hard to do.
I love it. Awesome. Well, thank you, Rob. I appreciate your time. I'll hit end recording. Thank you to the viewers. Like, comment, share, subscribe. Help out the algorithm. Let's get Rob back on the Conquer the Mind podcast.
Thank you so much.